Thank you, Maggie. To introduce myself, my name is Brandon Phipps. As Maggie mentioned, I'm CEO of Academic Works, uh, and I'm joined by Jason Bornhop. I'll go ahead and let Jason introduce himself and talk a little bit about the University of Missouri St. Louis first. We'll provide a quick overview of Academic Works. And then during today's presentation, we were going to discuss three primary phases of implementing a cloud-based scholarship management solution, including requirements gathering and planning, the actual implementation itself, and some steps post-implementation to take. We'll talk about some ideas and best practices that we've gathered at Academic Works through implementing with over 320 different institutions and foundations around the country, and have Jason kind of comment regarding their knowledge and experience through having implemented a system at the University of Missouri St. Louis. So with that, I wanted to turn it over to Jason just to talk a little bit about the University of Missouri St. Louis.
Thank you, Brandon. My name is Jason Bornhop. I've been with UMSL for about 9 years now. We've been through a PeopleSoft migration from our legacy system and an upgrade, and we've done 2 scholarship application implementations. One of them is Academic Works. The University of Missouri St. Louis is public, metropolitan. I don't know all the Carnegie terms anymore, and I believe they're changing soon. But the last time I checked, public, metropolitan, four-year doctoral research. We have a very large Pell population, and we're a large commuter school. We disperse about $26 million in scholarships annually, and 3 of that is through endowed and private funds. And as you can see, we have a very large undergraduate population, and we have about 5,000 students annually who are just high school students taking classes here on campus.
Quick background on Academic Works. Academic Works, we're the leading provider of scholarship management solutions for colleges, universities, and foundations. We work with about 375 different institutions and foundations around the country. About 320 of those are live with our system, and we have about 55 that are currently in implementation for the fall. The scope of what we do, we help institutions and foundations automatically match students with relevant scholarships, collect applications online, facilitate the committee review process, make scholarship awards and monitor award compliance and fund utilization, collect thank you letters from students as part of the stewardship process for providing feedback to donors, and then helping institutions and foundations manage their scholarship renewal process. For colleges and universities, we also provide a significant amount of integration with their existing student information system as well. So in terms of today's presentation, we wanted to start off and just talk about requirements gathering. So going into a process where you might want to implement a scholarship management solution, where do you start on campus or within your foundation in terms of getting all of the pieces in place? With Academic Works, these are some of the best practices that we found from our experience with our current client population. What a lot of our clients do initially is they'll sit down with the key stakeholders, either within their college, university, or foundation, and clearly define and prioritize what the problems are that they're trying to solve to help direct and steer exactly what type of solution they want to implement or which components they would like to automate first. What you'll probably find as you move through this process is you get some very interesting perspectives because scholarship management doesn't necessarily mean the same thing to everyone. You may have individuals involved with your foundation or advancement or donor stewardship function that really look at scholarship management as relating to effectively managing compliance, utilization of your scholarship funds, making sure all the money gets spent but does not get overspent, and the stewardship component, because they're the ones that are beholden to the donors in terms of providing them feedback on who received their scholarship award, going back to those donors to answer any questions regarding the compliance of awards that you might have. You may find that you have different objectives when you start talking to the individuals that are actually doing the awarding. So you might have individuals either in your financial aid office or managing your scholarship function within your foundation. And for them, typically efficiency is the most important component of a scholarship management implementation. So they want to more quickly match students with relevant scholarship opportunities. They want to make awards more quickly. within a system without having to manage a bunch of spreadsheets or paper applications. So that whole documentation process to them tends to be the piece that's most important. You'll also find that your reviewers have input into any type of scholarship management decision because they're accustomed to a very specific review process, allowing them to more effectively manage reviews without having to come into your office during a set time period or have a box of applications delivered to them that they need to review. They kind of see things a little bit differently. And for those of you that are with larger colleges and universities, you may have other players like your departments, your individual colleges where they may manage scholarships who have different needs, your finance office where they're trying to keep track of how much money is available in each one of the accounts and maximize the spend out of those various accounts. So a lot of different players can play into those objectives, so it's good to get an idea on the front end. Outlining your current process really helps as well. You may have multiple different processes for various distinct scholarship funds, so just laying out the workflow associated with those various processes, getting a clear understanding of what you want to accomplish. So what do you want the end process to look like once everything's all said and done? Do you need to integrate with other systems within your campus or foundation? So are there, many of you in a college or university environment might be validating student record data from your student information system whenever you receive applications. How do you eliminate that process to more efficiently pull that information directly into whatever system that you choose? You may also have outputs out of a scholarship management system where you want to write award data back to your donor management solution or to your student information system in terms of tracking which students received awards. Building consensus is also incredibly important. The bigger your institution or foundation, the more important this becomes. So who's going to be approving the process? Who are the individuals going to be interacting with the system? Some of those are going to be the same folks that you're talking to whenever you're coming up with your system, with your objectives for your project. But there may be other individuals that aren't necessarily involved in the scholarship process, but might wind up funding any initiative that you have, or having to offer high-level support as you're rolling this solution out within your foundation or institution. And then finally, last but not least, the timeline can be incredibly important because many of you probably have a very distinct scholarship cycle or cycles that occur within a calendar year. If your scholarship application process kicks off in October, then that time frame becomes a big driver in terms of when you need to have a system up and running, be fully tested, and have your various users trained. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jason just to talk about how the University of Missouri St. Louis handled some of these various tasks associated with pre-implementation.
Thank you, Brandon. So we had three main objectives when we were going into our implementation process and we were looking for a product. First and foremost, we had students who were going to every single department on campus that was relevant to them, and in many cases students were missing out on major opportunities. We just implemented one of our departments this year, and they still have their paper application on their website. And when we took a look at who did their paper app versus who did our application, only half of the department's students who had applied to them had applied to us. And we contacted them, but those students missed out on the funds from financial aid versus just the department, which does not have nearly as many scholarship opportunities as we offer. We also wanted to minimize the application requirements for students overall. Not only did we want more students applying and we didn't want them having to go everywhere, but we wanted to be able to collect as much information that we needed, but the least amount of information that we needed to make all of our decisions. And so we also wanted to be able to import our student data out of PeopleSoft and make sure that that information was current. So on a daily basis, we wanted to be able to export it. And we wanted to know that it was at all times being used to make decisions so that when we finally made the offers, we knew those were based on the most recent and accurate information possible. Next slide, please. So we wanted to, as part of this, we wanted to make sure that we were viewing the endowments, going back to the source documents. It is amazing how many departments would ask us, well, these are our criteria that we tell students, and when we look at the endowments, they didn't even align. Someone somewhere made a decision, or they just got confused, and those were being miscommunicated to students. So students were being expected to meet obligations that weren't there from the donor. So not only did we want to review the documents, but we also wanted to make sure they were digitized and available to everyone on campus. We've put all of ours into a SharePoint site, which we house, but you can also use Google Docs, Dropbox, anything like that. Just someplace that you can share that access so that anyone who's making the decisions can get to it. We also had to make sure that we understood the departmental process. We knew our process in-house, but we didn't necessarily know the departments that were coming on board. So we needed to know what were they collecting, how did they make their decisions. Was it one person? Did they use a spreadsheet based on quantifiable data that was readily available? Was it qualitative decisions based on essays? We had to understand that process. Once we had all this together, we wanted to put it all into an easy tabular form so we could quickly sort, determine what our actual data needs are, what our needs were on the application, so that we could figure out how best to put all of this together inside of Academic Works. So when we had to build a consensus, we had to get, of course, the financial aid director. We are housed in financial aid, but also the dean of enrollment, who oversees all of the enrollment management activities. And university advancement needed to be involved. We had donors who are participating in the scholarship review process. They can't select their recipients, but certainly they were reviewing applications and ranking them. So that was going to be a concern for us. We also had the campus IT and the system IT. It is a technology product, so we had to get their approval and buy-in because some of that we didn't have the technological skill in-house to handle. And last but not least, our functional users, financial aid and departments who were using our old system. We needed their buy-in. They had committed to the old system wasn't working, so we wanted to know that when we move forward, they were ready for that system as well. We did not look at students and donors, partly because we needed to move quickly. The old application was just unstable and we could no longer support it and justify its use. And the donors didn't really have an interaction with the system. They would review applications that we printed, but they were not our core users. They were not the ones who would be doing the applications, making the reviews, making the decisions. And so we did not involve them in the process either. As for the students themselves, anything was better than what we had. So we made that decision in-house based on some work study student testing within enrollment management. We had them try it out. What do you think? They were pleased. So in the end, Academic Works was the solution for us. Next slide. Thank you. So we had some key decisions. We had to figure out which scholarship programs we were going to do first. We had to figure out how the donors were going to be involved. We decided that only student financial aid could make formal awards in the system. That ability and access do exist outside of financial aid, but because we wanted to make sure that we were involving fiscal checks, that we were making sure that departments weren't going rogue and awarding non-eligible students, and we wanted to make sure that the information in Academic Works matched up with our PeopleSoft implementation, we made that decision that only financial aid could make the final offer. We also wanted to make sure that everything was implemented consistently. So we made the decision that we would manage all setup. There are some minor things that we will allow departments to change, but we wanted to make sure that everything was consistent and at the highest caliber. And there are just some things in the system that take so long to learn, you don't want to have to train someone new every year anyway, so we'll take care of it. Some of the other things that we were thinking about is we wanted to make sure that we had cost and expenditure controls. We wanted to make sure that awards were being made at all and that they were being made on time. We wanted to make sure that funds weren't being over-awarded, and we wanted to make sure that departments were hitting their target percentage each year. So if they were awarding 10% of a fund when we would rather have them at 80%, we could quickly go back to them. And one of the other things to keep in mind is your friendly neighborhood auditor. It just so happens while we were implementing Academic Works, we had an audit of our scholarship program. And while he was pleased with the software and the way we were going about it, he had concerns such as how will you segregate your duties, how you will report this information back, what skill sets are needed at each level. So those are other things that we hadn't considered until we were in the middle of the project and we had to actually sit down and think about it. And Brandon's going to talk a little bit about implementation.
Yeah, and before we do that, I just wanted to Maggie, were there any questions from the group?
No, we don't have any questions at this time, but just a reminder, if you do have a question, you can pose it on the bottom of your control panel under questions, and Brandon and Jason will answer it periodically. Thank you.
Well, let's talk a little bit about implementation in terms of the tasks, things to keep in mind during your implementation process. We'll talk both from a perspective of a college or university as well as from the perspective of a foundation. For colleges and universities, based on our experience with the clients that we've implemented, they tend to form a project team that ranges anywhere from about 2 to 5 individuals within the institution. There's usually representatives from the financial aid office or admissions area and advancement from a functional perspective, because again, you have those two different views in terms of the benefits that a system could provide that you want to have reflected in whatever final system that you wind up completing implementation with. You also tend to have individuals from IT, and there's two distinct areas that you'll probably have IT interaction in implementing a system. One of them is authentication, allowing students to log in using their existing campus credentials. And there's a number of different authentication methodologies. And then with our system in particular, there's a data import file that the campus sends us every night. And there's usually an IT person that's different from the authentication person responsible for developing reports out of the student record system. And they're the one that typically creates the file that they send to Academic Works every evening. If you're a foundation, you may have a project team that's a little bit smaller, anywhere from 1 to 3 people. And your scholarship person may also be the person who winds up doing the majority of the donor relations and stewardship tasks within your foundation. If that's the case, then having a one-person project team is okay. It's always better to have 2 people involved in the implementation if at all possible, because you never know when a family emergency may arrive. If you're in the midst of the implementation process, it really kind of shuts everything down if you're the only person that's working with your selected vendor or working with your in-house system on a day-to-day basis. So we always encourage people to have at least 2 people involved in the implementation, but because for a foundation you're not typically pushing and pulling information from other resources, you don't have to have those IT components associated with it. When you look at your schedule of when you want to go live with the system, it's really important to do a reality check on what your schedule looks like. If you're right in the midst of your reviewing cycle and there's going to be a lot of time taken in terms of dealing with your committee reviewers and making awards, or you've got a golf tournament coming up, or you're awarding brand new students coming in, or in Jason's case, you have an audit. You may want to consider that whenever you look at your implementation timeline. Our typical implementation is about 90 to 120 days for clients, but you want to look at when you want to be live with the system and kind of back up from there, look at all your summer vacations, and are there going to be people on the committee that aren't going to be able to participate during certain key times where their input might be required. Training, who are the users that are going to be involved in the system in terms of day in and day out? You're obviously going to have a student component, some review committee members for the majority of you, your administrators within the system as well. Looking at those various user types, trying to assess in terms of how much interaction are they going to have with the system and what training requirements you want to make available can often be very important. You also want to look at the time frame for when those users are going to be interacting with the system. One of the things we always recommend as clients go through the implementation process is if you have users, say for example reviewers, where you might be going live with the system for applicants in December, but reviewers aren't interacting with the system until April or May, you may want to hold off on training those reviewers and not train them at the outset of the go live process, because they may have forgotten everything by the time they actually need to interact with the system. So timing out those trainings can be important as well. Testing, and I know Jason will comment on this and some of the things that they did at University of Missouri St. Louis. Testing a system is incredibly important. I always encourage clients to go in and use the system as an actual user, each one of the various user roles, an applicant, a reviewer, an administrator, so you can get context for what individuals are going to be doing when they actually go live. With our system, as with most of the other systems you select, the system will function, but you have an opportunity to kind of bend or mold any system you select to the needs of your specific institution or foundation, and that's going to change the instructional text and the nomenclature. So you really want to go through and make sure that that makes sense to you. Since you have probably been interacting with it for a long period of time, just like anything else, when you're looking at the same thing over and over and over again, you understand it more in context than a new person. So we always encourage our clients to ask for student volunteers to create test accounts in their system, go through the actual application process, maybe even do some fictitious reviews with reviewers before they flip the switch and turn everything on. We can certainly make adjustments after you've gone live, but you may have already had several hundred students that have gone through the process at that point. And then finally, communication is incredibly important. About half of any software implementation is the software itself, what the system's going to do. The other half, especially within colleges, universities, and foundations, is that political side of it. Change is coming. Change is scary. A lot of people, your constituents might have been doing the same exact thing for the past 30 or 50 or 100 years as it relates to scholarships. So letting them know that change is coming early on, that it's going to be coming for this current cycle, doing presentations with smaller groups when you've gotten a good portion of the way down the implementation process, maybe launching with a few select departments, which I know Jason will talk about, for your initial scholarship cycle so that word can spread in a positive fashion before you go live with everybody. Those things can all really help in terms of the acceptance of the system once it's rolled out. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Jason and just have him talk a little bit about what happened at University of Missouri St. Louis.
So our project team was a lot like our approval team, everyone that we had to get involved. I was the lead on this project, and I did a lot of the work. But I needed help from my team, and so I can't write shibboleth authentication or Active Directory authentication, and I certainly can't write 10,000 lines of SQL code, so I'm very thankful for my IT team for that. But I also needed to get involved with the future opportunity administrators, the high-level administrators at either the college level or within the office who not only knew the old system, but were well aware of their process within their departments to help make us key-level decisions on how to use the system at implementation time. And they were most important in helping us build consensus and acceptance with the departments under their purviews. For training, we had to figure out what was going to be accessible, what was not going to be accessible. The high-level stuff, the very detailed techie stuff, we do not make public. But we have demos, we have tutorials, we have handouts that are accessible for students, that are accessible for reviewers and references, and we've even linked those in our communications. So when a reviewer or a reference gets the communication, there's a link right within that email taking them to our web-based training for people. We also had to define how to use the system for our organization. Academic Works Help Desk is amazing. You can find just about anything you want on it, but it doesn't tell you how to use it at UMSL. So the fund code is the item type from PeopleSoft or the award ID or however you code it in your system. And then the other fund code is the PeopleSoft financial speed key. So we can link directly into our student system and we can link directly back into our financial system. Those are decisions that are made at the individual organizational level. So we had to document that kind of information and make sure that was all clear for our end users as well. And in that, it also builds in the process of expectations that financial aid has decided about scholarships in general, or how university advancement has decided about scholarships in general, and how they'll be administered here on the campus. Testing. I love testing. I tested this system in ways that I didn't even know testing was possible. And I did that by using a fake scholarship. We didn't make it visible unless we were trying to test the application itself and it opened it up for students. But it was there so we could test every facet of it. We could sign in as ourselves, as students, as reviewers, and we could see how little changes would start to trickle through the system and be aware of what this change here might do there. Even to this day, I still have that opportunity. even though Brandon's team tried to delete it when we went live. And we use it for any new department that's coming on board, and we use it whenever there's a change in the system that we want to see how it works. So it's definitely a good thing to have if you can't get a quality assurance or some sort of test environment, have that test opportunity that you can control. Once I thought I'd figured everything out, then I would document it and I would hand it off to people. And they'd read my instructions, they'd come back and say, you missed a step, or this doesn't make sense. And then we'd clean up the documentation and give it to another person and say, how does this work, until we got something that was actually usable. And we also wanted to make sure that we had test applications. So early on, we would have staff sign in and do applications, and we'd mess around with those. And then when we had our data exports going, we would have students sign in so we could test and see the data that was coming across and how that matched up as well. Just all sorts of little testing, checking, verifying, validating. It never stops. I'm sure any of you who have ever done a PeopleSoft bundle or a banner upgrade know it never stops. Communications. So there were a lot of communications that we had to think about in brand new ways when we went live with this system. In the past, we would advertise the application, but now we had to advertise that we had a completely new application that was a completely different experience. We had students give up on our old application, and so we needed them to understand it was safe to try it again and come back and do what they needed to do. For references, we'd never had references outside of one scholarship opportunity ever. And so we had to completely rethink how that happened, because in the past it was a paper application and the student would hand the form to the reference and they would mail it back. Well, in Academic Works, the student can list the reference's name and they get an email. So we had to make sure that communication was clear and the training was available and the references knew who to contact, because sometimes the students wouldn't even go to the reference before they would list their name, which is bad practice, and we warn the students, but they would do it. We know how you see a name, you put it in, you don't necessarily know what happens afterwards. Reviewers as well. We had to revise our communication strategy. We had to revise our scholarship rubrics, because in the old days we would print anonymous applications and sit around a table and just rank them. And that was no longer the process that we were going to accept, and that didn't work quite as well in Academic Works, and we were okay with that, because that was partly why we chose Academic Works, was for the ability to use rubrics and show the process by which students were being scored and decisions were made. In the past, we had communications for the students who were awarded. Those were often paper or email letters, and thankfully Academic Works streamlines that for us so that when we make an offer inside the system, the communication is ready to go. But we had to rethink that. All of our old communications had years and dates in them, and we didn't want to continue that inside of Academic Works because we wanted to minimize our maintenance. We also had to think about non-recipients. Did you apply and you didn't get it? Well, who was going to get that communication? Was that going to be all students? Was it only going to be certain students? So we had to rethink that, and we had to standardize it with other departments coming on board, because a lot of departments were doing their own thing. And last but not least, we had the opportunity and system administrators, the high-level administrators who needed to know what were new policy decisions coming out, what were changes coming from Academic Works, how are we going to implement those, and how are we going to communicate those back to our users. Follow-up and cycle management are part of all of this. The follow-up might be for students, it might be for administrators, it might be for anyone. How do you make sure that the person who needs to do something is doing what they need to? And cycle management is year-end rollover. When do we let people know, don't use the system for the next 3 weeks because we will be setting up for next year? Those were all communications that we had to come up with. Some of them we tweaked, and some of them we didn't realize we needed until midnight before we started using them. So that was a lot of fun. Some time savers. Understand the system delivered templates. If you have any delivered templates, make sure you know how they are impacted and what changes happen when you make changes to those templates. I broke a few templates originally. Thankfully, Academic Works has fixed those recently for me. But if I changed the template and I had a scholarship where the template was broken, I may not catch that I had put in a date there. And so for the next year, it was talking about last year's date deadlines. But also outside of Academic Works, we started to create templates for our standard communications. So we might have for our offer letter a standard paragraph, and then 2 possible paragraphs you would choose from, and then 2 more possible paragraphs that you choose from, and then a paragraph you choose from. So you just grab the 4 paragraphs you need, copy, paste, and move on, as opposed to trying to type it out each time. It saved a lot of time, and it made sure that we were doing every communication the same way and in the way that we needed to. Keep it simple. I mentioned earlier that I had some dates in a communication. Try to avoid dates, try to avoid years. Sometimes you have to come up with some funny language. For instance, one of our questions is how many hours do you plan to enroll in the upcoming fall? And our application opens in November. So the student's like, it's fall semester now, I'm in 12 hours. No, we mean next fall. So how do you word that? And unfortunately, you have to think about those details when you're using that language, or you have to think about the details when you're keeping the letters generic. What does it look like if I'm an applicant? What does it look like if I'm a recipient? Does it look like 3 years from now when I'm being renewed for my last year? Those are the time frames that you have to think about. Or even, does the award change over time? Did the criteria change from this year over last year? Does that impact what the student sees who received it last year and is being renewed? Those are other considerations to take. So some lessons learned, some gotchas. It always takes longer than you think. I estimated 1,000 hours for the first year, and I think I spent about 1,500 hours. And a lot of that goes back to that testing and learning how the system works intricately and knowing where little changes that are made come back and possibly bite you later. You'll find issues with your process. Our original process, I knew it in my head, but it wasn't written down, and that's always a problem. And so if that process that you have belongs in one person's head and is not being shared appropriately, then it doesn't have the chance for others to identify the gaps. So the issues in your process are best addressed by knowing your process, writing it down, identifying the gaps, and identifying what you want to fix, and knowing what your must-haves versus your wants are when you're going through this process. You will find functional gaps in the software. Something might not work. I give highest kudos to Academic Works for responding to bug fixes and for being very responsive in customers' needs. I believe, Brandon, you had, what, 6 product releases last year?
Yeah, I did. So about every 6 to 8 weeks, we do a new release.
So they are constantly developing and enhancing the software. So if it doesn't work now, maybe it'll work in 6 months, but you still have to get around it now. And then keep in mind that decisions you make now will impact the future. So it goes back to thinking about, well, this is what it is now, but what's it going to look like in 3 years for a student if we use this language now, or if we use this process? How do we keep that as consistent and unchanging as we can? And then understand the full impact of a change before you make it. That goes back to the templates I broke. That goes back to using years that get lost in communications, those kinds of things. Does anyone have any questions?
So there is one question from Stacy, and her question is, what is shibboleth? Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah.
Okay.
Shibboleth is an authentication methodology that's commonly used among colleges and universities. So it's a way whenever a student is logged in to various campus resources, they can also be logged into Academic Works as well. But it's specific to the college and university realm. There's other methodologies out there, solutions like LDAP or Active Directory, or SAML is another one that's used very commonly within higher education.
So that is the only question that I have here.
Any other questions so far, Maggie?
No other questions. Oh, what? Here's one more.
Great.
Here's one more question, actually, just came in from Lori. Give an example of a small change or large one that was a result of the 6 to 8 upgrades enhancements.
Sure. In the past 6 months or so, we've had a couple different enhancements that have come out, and I can let Jason kind of comment on the ones that have been most impactful for University of Missouri St. Louis. The way we handle enhancements in Academic Works, every time we receive an enhancement, it comes in through our customer service portal, or it's entered in by one of our staff. So whether the client calls us or emails us or participates via chat support, all of those wind up with our product management group. So we have a group of people that are basically dedicated to classifying new feature requests that come in. And sometimes there might be a feature request for one client that seems fundamentally different, but it's actually the same core root function within the system that we need to develop. we develop in very short iterations, but release very frequently. So every 6 to 8 weeks, we're rolling out new code so that we can be very responsive to customer needs. And we're also looking at time frame of when releases are coming out. So we're not going to completely rework the way that committee reviews occur in the March to May time frame when all of our client committee reviewers are active in the system. We might hold off on something like that until late summer. Some of the big functions that we've had come out over the course of the past few months include what we refer to as scopes. And the scope allows you to assign ownership, so to speak, to specific scholarship opportunities within the system. So we used to have named system owners. Brandon would own this particular scholarship. Jason would own another scholarship for the liberal arts college. I'd own all the ones for business. But what we found was that there were cases where there might be multiple owners for a specific scholarship within an individual department. So I might have 3 other people that also own that same scholarship as an administrator, not necessarily as a reviewer, but as an administrator. Or there might be scholarships that Jason and I collaborate on that are cross-departmental, where the donor wanted to give a scholarship to both sides of the house, liberal arts and business, and we have kind of a common committee that's reviewing for both. So we created scopes where you could have multiple owners of a specific scholarship fund, made that assignment process very quick and effective, and that scope process is also used to assign review committees as well. So you can give a committee a scope over which funds they are responsible for reviewing for and assign that same scope to the fund, and that's what controls the rights and permissions throughout the entire system. So that was one of our first releases, and it's something that we're looking to expand and extend out. We also made a number of communication enhancements to the system. We added about 12 new templates to provide automated notifications out of Academic Works for things like, for example, whenever a reference provider has not submitted their reference by a specific date, sending an automated reminder to that reference provider in the system. Call it a rejection template, sounds kind of harsh, but automatically providing one message to all students that did not receive a scholarship award within a given scholarship cycle. So if they completed the application and they don't have any awards, giving you a template that you can create one message to notify all of those students on a specific date. So those were a few of the templates. We also released what we refer to as conditional applications, and this came up as we were talking from a institution perspective. Colleges and universities, the College of Business might have one review committee for all 50 of their scholarship funds, and they wanted a certain set of questions asked of every College of Business student. So in addition to students completing the general application, they can also be asked that series of conditional application questions only if they're a College of Business student, or only if they're an incoming freshman or transfer student or current student. So you can set up those conditional applications pursuant to specific groups to make sure that you can ask a batch of questions that might be applicable to a large number of scholarship funds in the system. So that rolled out recently as well. On the foundation side, that could allow you to bifurcate your process. If you have some scholarships for incoming freshmen and others for current students, and you want to have a very different application experience for both, the conditional applications allow you to do that as well. So those are all a few components that came out over the course of the past 3 releases over the past 6 months or so.
Great. I have a few more questions. One from Liz. I have a question in regards to the references. Are only internal faculty allowed to make a reference, or can outside people such as high school counselors submit a reference letter?
No, you can allow outside people to submit references through the Academic Work system. So the student can enter in the name and the email address of the individual providing the reference. The system will automatically email that reference provider and ask that they submit a confidential letter of reference through the system. The reference provider would log in with their email address, and they would create a password the first time they log in, and then they'd use that email address and password to log in for subsequent sessions. So if someone was asked for 5 references from 5 different students, they wouldn't have to remember 5 different account credentials. They would just have one set of credentials that would allow them to submit all of those references for all 5 students.
And a
Be a
follow-up.
reference letter. It could be a series of questions the reference providers respond. Go ahead.
And at UMSL, we don't even allow departments to set up faculty references. The reason being that once that reference functionality is set up, you cannot stop the reference from going out even if the student is not eligible for the scholarship. So we don't want to have faculty submitting references for ineligible students. And we got around that by asking on our general application for the names and emails of 2 faculty that the committees can then contact later for additional information if they need it. So we only implement the reference functionality for non-faculty references.
Thank you. There's actually a follow-up question regarding references from Tammy. How does a student know if their references have been provided?
In the system, the student can actually look at their account and they can see that the reference has been submitted. They can also see that that reference has been received. We have a confirmation email as well that goes out as part of that reference process now with the new templates.
Great. 2 more questions.
However, the students cannot see the content. Yeah, great.
There are 2 more questions. Would you like to continue, or should I go ahead and read them?
Yeah, you can go ahead and read those.
Okay. Here's one from Liz. Are committees who are assigned to a certain opportunity sent reminders to ensure they submit their recommendations timely?
There are notifications that go out to the review committees when on a specific date. So you set a date within the system and that automatically triggers an email notification out to the reviewers. We have a reminder that you can have a specific offset in the academic work system to say 7 days prior to the end review date, have a notification go out to those reviewers as well. There's not multiple reminders, however, it's just the one. And Jason, have you turned those templates on at UMSL yet?
We've turned on a few of the templates, but we haven't done anything with the references and reviewers yet.
Okay.
And the last question that I have for now is from Lori. How much of a problem is it for the references not getting the template emails due to firewall problems?
There is within a college or university environment, there is what's referred to as an SPF record. So Academic Works, we're sending emails on behalf of our clients. And we use, we're very careful in terms of the types of emails that go out of our system, the frequency with which those emails are sent, to make sure that our emails stay as deliverable as possible. One thing that really helps is if a college has a specific domain that they utilize, they can check off and say that it is okay for Academic Works to send emails on our behalf. So we're using the campus's URL, and when those emails hit the institution, there's a record that the campus can insert into their firewalls to allow those emails through and make them much more deliverable.
And from UMSL, we've heard of references saying we never got the email. And so we, in the application at the time of reference, also communicate to students, make sure you talk to your reference, make sure you let them know the email is coming, and then follow up with your reference a couple days after you've listed them here so that they know to go look for the email. And it also gives that reminder to the reference to go finish that process.
Great, thank you. That's all the questions I have at this point.
Okay. Well, let's move on and talk a little bit about post-implementation. In terms of training resources, with Academic Works, one of the things that we really focus on is building out robust training resources that can be used by all of our customers. So the facets of the system that are going to be common across all of our clients, we've created recorded trainings, both that are on demand, which you can watch 3 to 5 minute videos if you need to set up a new fund or set up a reviewer group. But also we do live webinar trainings, and we do those about 10 to 12 times per month. The topics range in experience level from novice to advanced users. It's a great opportunity if you have a new administrator to allow them to sign up for those trainings and attend. But you do want to be very considerate in terms of building out training resources because you will have staff turnover over time, and you want to make sure those resources are available. As Jason kind of alluded, the student population changes every year, so you do want to have some type of marketing plan to advertise your site. With Academic Works, we publish a listing of all of the available scholarship opportunities across the entire campus in one place. If you go to any large institution and type in scholarships, in some cases you get 200 or 300 different responses via Google search. Giving students one place to go to and showing them there's a whole bunch of opportunities kind of helps drive that traffic. But you also want to do outreach through your admissions process, or if you're a foundation, reaching out to some of your high school counselors to encourage them to drive traffic your direction. And then doing an annual process review. We sit down every year through a cycle management process with our clients to just kind of discuss some of the things that have come out in the past year, since we do very frequent releases and offer new functionality, making sure clients are taking advantage of that. But if you're building a system in-house, you certainly want to make sure that you're always looking at your process for a continued improvement through some type of annual review. And then finally, archiving records, making sure that your data is available from, as Jason mentioned, an audit perspective, that you're archiving off your application, your award data, so that it's available if you need to pull it at some future point. With Academic Works, that process happens automatically. But you want to make sure you have a process for being able to access that data effectively should you have an audit or request, even from a donor of where their money was allocated. So I'll turn it over to Jason and just let him talk about the process, the rollout at the University of Missouri St. Louis and kind of where they're at currently.
So when we first got the system, we got access to it in July of 2013, and so we had a very short turnaround time. And I'm the kind of person who prefers to have a hands-on knowledge of the system before I try to implement. And so we wanted to do a soft launch, not only to start to announce the application quietly, but also so we could get our hands-on the system and figure out how that was working. The Opportunity Scholars Program and Enterprise Opportunity Drivers Scholarship, the OSP and the EODS, were our full scholarships, and so that allowed us to test every functionality of the system. And can you go back, Brendan?
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you. So we got to test the general application, we got to test opportunity-specific questions, the reference and reviewer, awarding, and even renewal management. These were some of the first scholarships that we put through the renewal management module, which was functionality we added last year. And so that was really a good way for us to test in real time in a real scenario what the functionality of the system was going to be and figure out what was going to work at UMSL and other situations. Going forward, in the fall of 13, next slide please. Thank you. And so in the fall of 13 to the spring of 14, we needed to move forward with all of the organizations and departments that were on the old system. Financial Aid, College of Ed, and College of Business Administration had all been using the old scholarship application, so naturally they would be the first ones to go live. We also added the Honors College, and we added the Arts and Sciences Dean's Office to start to expand the system. And because these were strategic, both politically and functionally, in adding new departments into the system. The Honors College oversees one of the programs I mentioned on the previous slide, and so it only made sense that their entire process would go to Academic Works. And in the Arts and Sciences Dean's Office, we knew that we were going to have an uphill battle moving everyone in Arts and Sciences over, so we wanted the Dean's Office to lead the way by example. Once we got into last year, we started working on the College of Optometry. We pulled over half the College of Arts and Sciences, the College of Fine Arts and Communications, College of Nursing, plus we had to go through cycle management for the first time. That's when you archive, that's when you figure out how you're going to update and make changes for the new year. And Academic Works likes a month, so we said you get about a week and a half. They love it when I call over there. But they were very helpful. They worked with us. Just the way our schedule works, we were cleaning up awards in early September, and we had to go live in October for our full ride scholarship and our transfer students. So we just have always had one of those schedules that I really wish we could cut back on our scholarship window from 12 months out of the year to maybe 6, but that's just not going to happen for us anytime soon. And we also purchased the renewal management module last year and started implementing that. The decision there being it would be easier to backtrack on the ones that were already set up and then set it up on all new ones going forward at the same time, as opposed to setting up the entire campus and then having to backtrack with renewal management in about 3 years. Going forward, we will finish the College of Arts and Sciences, we will do the graduate school, and then there are a few stragglers on the campus. Plus, you heard Brandon mention conditional apps earlier. We are looking to implement those for our incoming student applications as well as our study abroad, since most of our study abroad applications actually exist inside of specific departments and units and not inside of our study abroad office. So we will be using the scopes to allow multiple people to manage those scholarship funds and to see the applications, but then also using the conditional apps to target those students who indicate they will be study abroad students in the coming year. I think that's all we have. What kind of questions does everyone have?
So I don't see any additional questions at this time. Maybe give folks a few seconds. If there's any remaining questions, you can go ahead and write them in. Yeah, so I think we'll go ahead and finish up. Thank you, Brandon and Jason, for your very informative presentation. As a reminder, this webinar was recorded. The recording and all supporting documents will be posted on the NSPA website by next Wednesday. This concludes the NSPA webinar today. Thank you for joining us and have a great rest of the day. Take care.
Thank you, Maggie. Thanks, Jason.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.